Good evening, everyone. My name is Maureen Wilson, and it is my great honor to serve as your Ward 1 counselor. We are here this evening in a virtual public meeting to discuss the HAAA in the wonderful neighborhood of Kirkendall. We have two of these public meetings planned, as you know, one this evening and an identical meeting planned for Saturday at 10:30 in the morning. We wanted to give folks a choice because we all have busy lives, and we were hoping to encourage your participation by making the two available. Before we begin, I would like to read the city's land acknowledgement, and then I will provide a roadmap for the evening, introduce some people, and then we can get right to business. The city of Hamilton is situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. This land is covered with the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabeg to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We further acknowledge that this land is covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase 1792 between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Today, the city of Hamilton is home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we recognize that we must do more to learn about the rich history of this land so that we can better understand our roles as residents, neighbors, partners, and caretakers. So before you on the screen is a list of the project team for this particular park renewal. I'm joined this evening by Stephanie Hilson, who works with me in the Ward 1 office. Stephanie is going to serve as the moderator for the evening in terms of taking care of your questions. Also joining us is Wes Kindry. Wes is with the City of Hamilton, the Public Works Department, and specifically the Landscape Architectural Services Division. Wes is the project lead or the manager of this particular renewal plan. Wes will be joined in some of his work by Mary Ann McCricky, landscape architect consultant with OMC Landscape Architecture in Hamilton. And also joining us is Lawrence Stasiak, a supervisor with the City of Hamilton Public Works, also in the Landscape Architectural Services Division. I'd like to thank them all for sharing their time with us this evening. So the roadmap for tonight, or the agenda. My welcome to you all, the land acknowledgements, the introductions, and then I'm going to right now hand it over to Stephanie, who's going to tell us how we're going to interact in this virtual world in which we have to do our work. Wes will do the presentation, and he will discuss the future engagement tools that are available, and then we'll have a Q&A. Over to you, Wes.
Welcome, everybody. I see it's a big turnout tonight. We have almost 100 people in attendance. I just want to say thank you for coming. Tonight, we're here to focus on the HAAA, so Hamilton Amateur Athletic Association grounds. Landscape Architectural Services, along with the Ward 1 office, is looking to start a park renewal of the HAAA grounds. The park's current features are reaching the end of their service life, and to ensure the community can continue to enjoy the HAAA grounds, these aging park features need to be replaced. The renewal plan process is used to develop an overall park concept that staff will use to plan future upgrades in a phased multi-year approach. Now, when we say a concept, we're really looking at it on a high level. So we're looking to focus on things like the location of the features within the park, opportunities that the park currently doesn't have, talk about the park's strengths, talk about the park's weaknesses, the accessibility within the park, make sure that we're creating a place that's inclusive, that we can allow all to use it and make sure it's a safe spot. What the renewal plan does not cover would be focused details on amenities. So I'm going to use a play structure for an example. When we look at the concept, We look at it as a play structure. We look at it as the space it's going to be situated in. We don't necessarily look at it as in should have 2 slides or should have 3 swing bays. That will come later in the stages. At this point, we're just looking to create a vision. During the renewal process, we're looking to hear from you, which I'm going to call the park usage experts. You are the ones that live and breathe within the park. You have those emotions with the park. You really know what goes on within it. Myself, without that information, we can do what we think is working for the community, but without having that feedback, we really don't know if what we're proposing or what's in the park now is really serving the purpose of the community or serving what the community is looking for within the park. So I mentioned earlier that we're looking at it at a concept level. So a quick display here, we're showing a concept plan in the top left-hand corner that really focuses on the idea and the relationships within the park. So we're showing a junior and senior play structure. Most of our parks, especially at the community level, will have a junior and senior play structure, but we don't go into the details on what those play structures actually look like. We use them as generic placeholders. We define areas within the park. So we define a play area. We define a picnic area. What we're doing is we're preparing a plan that we can use as an overall vision of the site. What we want to do during this process is take the opportunity to make sure that the park represents a place of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We want to make sure that what we're doing is open to all. We want to, if there are barriers currently in place, we want to remove those barriers. We want to take that opportunity to step back, make sure that those who want to use the park are doing so, and they have that opportunity in a safe and respectable manner. When we look at a detailed design, which would be later on, that we'll talk about later, that's when we start looking at the exact details. So in the play structure, as an example, that's when we start looking at what kind of slides we want, what color scheme we want, what kind of structure, whether it's going to be a conventional slides, if we want climbers, if we want, the new thing is ninja sports these days where they use their body weights and they climb through it and they jump and crawl through different amenities. We want to make sure that we don't focus on that much detail at this point. We're really trying to make sure that where our play structure is situated, as an example, would be the best spot for it in the park. Now, when we look at this, we're not saying that we have to redesign HAAA. It's a lovely park the way it is. But as park users, we want to know if the way the amenities are currently placed cause you any issues, or if you have any thoughts, or if there's any ways that we can improve it. This is our opportunity. Usually when we get to detailed design, it's always based on the concept, but sometimes there is some variations that need to happen, but it's still in keeping with the vision. The example on the screen is showing the original concept showed play structures divided by a shade structure. When that was actually further progressed into a detailed design stage, I don't know the full ins and outs of this specific assignment, but we see that the play structures were grouped together. So they made one continuous space. You can't see it on the screen, but the shade structure was actually moved north, the upper side of the pathway. There could be numerous reasons, one being it makes it easier to view the whole area of the play area with a single view. And it's a good viewpoint from where the shade structure would have been situated, opposed to breaking it up in the middle and not being able to see the junior and senior at one time. We also, when we get to detailed design, we make sure that we meet the site requirements. If there's any unique characteristics of the site, underground servicing, easements, we also make sure that it meets like AODA compliance, CSA requirements, and all the other regulatory requirements that we need to make when we look at a park. To ensure the renewal plan is successful, we need your help. As I mentioned, you're the resident experts of the actual usage of the park. So the best way to execute this renewal plan would be in a collaborative effort between city staff and the HAAA grounds community. The renewal plan process will look like something public information centers. So like tonight, this is virtual. Because of the pandemic, we're forced to do this in a virtual environment. As we progress through the renewal plan, those restrictions that are currently in place might be lifted, might be softened. We don't know what's going to happen. For the time being, we're looking at a virtual environment, but we could potentially go back to some in-person activities, potentially even a PIC. We want to provide opportunity for community feedback through project-specific tools. We'll talk about this later, but what this is lots of opportunities. Like we'll present something, tonight being an example, this PIC, and then we're going to look for feedback on tonight, what we discussed, and also your ideas. We want to hear from you. The project team that we just discussed a little earlier, we have to take that information and we want to make sure that we can summarize it, consolidate it, and make sure that what we receive and what we heard from you is we use that to create concepts. So that information will be presented back at a later date once we consolidate it and we have it in a presentable form. We take that and we use it and we start preparing our concept plans. Concept plans, like we talked about, we're looking at placemakers, placeholders. We're looking at generic terms, generic placement. We want to make sure that park really works. That concept, again, would be reviewed as a team, and then later on it will be refined down to a final renewal plan. Once we have the end goal, which is a renewal plan, so a high-level concept of the entire site, we're going to start looking at it and using that plan to plan a multi-year phased approach. So what that means is not everything will be constructed at one time. Because of budget restrictions, time commitments, and overall workload of the site, we want to break it down into individual projects. So let's say call them phases. So it would be, let's say, a 3-year phased approach. So once we're finished with the renewal plan, we've determined that we're going to do this in a phased approach and identified what amenities are in that phase. We're going to start the phase 1 detailed design works. What phase 1 is at this point, we don't really know until we start looking at the renewal plan. And when we do the detailed design work, that's when we'll do specific engagement. So that's when we'll start focusing on the specific amenities. And I'm going to go back to the play structure because it's a very understandable one to relate to. The users of the play structure are typically the youth. So when we go to the detailed design stage, that's when we're going to really focus in on the youth engagement. We want to hear what they want to see, what cool elements they've enjoyed at other parks, what they really like, what they don't like, what they haven't used before, what scares them, why it scares them, how we can improve that. So now that we've talked about what the renewal process is for HAAA, let's look at how that's going to actually play out. So here we are today. Today we're having the PIC number 1. We're also having the same session on Saturday. We're having the same session on Saturday. And what we're looking to use that as is a project kickoff. So we're looking to introduce the project, let you know how we can interact throughout the project, let you know what the goals of the project are, and just really start that dialogue. We want to start hearing from you. After Saturday and after tonight, actually, we encourage you to share your thoughts. We have something called Engage Hamilton, which some of you might be familiar with. It's a platform that the city uses, an Engage Hamilton platform that has multiple projects on it. And these projects are for public engagement. In the virtual environment, it's very useful. So what we need to do is, I'm asking that we can go to that Engage Hamilton site, click on the Hamilton Amateur Athletic Association project page. We can go through this later, we'll talk about it. But when you're on that page, there's lots of tools in there. There's 4 or 5 tools in there that give you an opportunity to interact with us via different avenues. That information will be consolidated, and then our design team will take that information and start to prepare some concepts. We'll prepare those concepts. This is the 3-month period basically before our next PIC. So those concepts are developed. Depending on how much feedback we receive and the variation in that feedback, we could prepare 1, 2, or 3 concepts. Those concepts would come back to the table in May, and that's when we would present those concepts back to the community. Likely in the same kind of environment we're in now, virtual. We don't see that changing at this time. And then we're going to start that dialogue. We'll go through the concepts, discuss why we've proposed things or why this is being shown, and we'll also go over the results of all the community feedback we've received in that 3-month period. And then when we leave that public information center number 2, we're going to start the process again. So we're going to open the floor back up and start to receive that community feedback through the Engage Hamilton platform. And we're going to consolidate that information after a 4-week or 3-week window of that information being presented. And then we're going to start to develop what we're going to refer to as a final renewal plan. So that final renewal plan would then be prepared sometime in September, that we'd come back and have another PIC. Hopefully by that time we can do that in person. But if we're doing it virtually, we'll be in the same situation that we're in now. And we will present a final renewal plan. So this is a final concept showing the overall vision of HAAA moving forward. And that vision could look very similar to what the layout is now, with some minor tweaks and maybe some new introductions of some features in the park. Also at this time, we'll have a good understanding on how we're going to phase the implementation. So how we actually build the park. So from that PIC, we're going to go right into the phase 1 focused engagement. And for this example, I'm going to use the spray pad and the play structure. Potentially that will be our phase 1 work. For the purpose of this discussion, let's call that phase 1 work. So we're going to open it up for like a 5 or 6 week window that we're going to focus on the engagement of youth, the end users, the community, the school boards around us, and everybody else that's actually an end user of that feature. We want to start a specific engagement where we will hopefully get to meet in person, meet on site, do the exercises that you might have seen before, dotmocracy. There's a pin exercise that we'll talk about later. Have them share ideas, have them take photos that they've seen over the years or where they've seen, provide recommendations. That's really where we want to focus down on the phase 1 work, again, the spray pad and the play structure at this time, as an example. We want to hear as much detail as possible from the actual users of what they want to see on those 2 elements. During the concept stage, we know where those elements are going to be located within the park. We just don't know what those elements are actually going to look like in the end. This is our opportunity to refine that and make sure that we really nail that. That detailed design will move to a detailed design stage, and then it will be implemented in the construction stage. So we anticipate right now that construction of that phase 1 work will happen in 2022 and likely happen in April, June, just before the summertime. But again, we don't actually know what the phase 1 work is at this time, and we'll refine that as we go through the renewal plan process. And at stage, the PIC number 3, we'll be able to present what stage 1 is, and we'll plan for that prior to. So tonight we're here, Hamilton Amateur Athletic Association, known as HAAA. For the rest of the evening, I'll refer to it as HAAA. To give you a little background on where it's situated, it's a 7-acre park down in Kirkendall neighborhood. It's north of Charleston Avenue. To the west of it is the residential properties. It is home to the Hamilton Tennis Club, which is city-owned, but it's run by a private organization, the Hamilton Tennis Club. To the northeast, we have Ryerson Recreation Center. Just to the east there, we have Ryerson Middle School. And to the south, what you see there is those 5 stars. Those are dedicated entrances to the park. So right now, those are our formal park entrances. When we look at the park, the background, a quick overview of it. 1874, the grounds were secured by the Hamilton Cricket Club. So this is when the grounds were actually deemed a sports ground. And over the next 30 years, it was used for rugby, cricket. Some football was introduced later on in those years. It was used for sports. It's a privately owned. In 1910, the Tiger Football Club, we know them now as the Hamilton Ticats, but originally they were the Tiger Football Club, bought a 1/3 interest in the cricket grounds, leading to the formation of the Hamilton Amateur Athletic Association, known as HAAA. It's also the year of first of 7 Grey Cups to be played at HAAA grounds. Hamilton won 5 of those. The playing field at the grounds changed to run north and south that same year, opposed to east and west. New steel grandstands were installed on the west side, which we see as the play structure and spray pad. In 1913, the Tigers Football Club actually went overseas to battle in the Great War, known as World War I, as a complete unit. In 1919, those players that went overseas unfortunately did not return from the war. They gave their lives. And in the park, there's a monument honoring that loss. In 1919, the Prince of Wales also visited the HAAA grounds to present medals to the veterans that fought in that war, and also to pay their respects to those who lost their lives. In 1927, the main grandstands that we talked about on the west-hand side, they actually burned down. So did the dressing rooms that were currently being used for the field. This was also the time of the Depression, and the privately owned facility went into arrears, and the city took over in 1927. In 1930, the field house was built that we know today that we see on Charleston Avenue. In 1945, the Parks Board entered into an agreement for the purchase of the HAAA grounds. Now, the Parks Board was part of the city, but they were a separate entity within it. So when they purchased the grounds, they determined that they were going to turn these into grounds for everyone to use. In 1949, the Hamilton Tigers played the last season at the HAAA ground before moving to Civic Stadium and also moving into the Hamilton Ticats name. In 1977, the Park Board issued a tender and they transformed the HAAA grounds into a community park while still keeping that sport characteristic to it. They introduced a new asphalt pathway. They introduced the new football field that's going north-south that we see now. They introduced a 400-meter clay cinder track, and they added some washrooms and shower facilities to the clubhouse, which we see today. In 1993, the spray pad was constructed that we see. And in 1997, the play structure was added and the swings installed that we know today. So over the last 25 years, from 1997 to 2021, it's 24 years that that park has provided enjoyment to the community. This has taken the toll on a lot of the amenities within it, as they're starting to show the wear and tear. And that brings us to today, where we're looking to do a renewal plan. We're looking to upgrade most of the features within the site because they're starting to show their sign. They're looking a little tired, and we want to make sure that this park is represented the way it should be. So knowing that background, the site HAAA grounds is identified as a cultural heritage landscape within the Urban Hamilton Official Plan and found on the city's heritage inventory. The existing clubhouse is also listed within the Urban Hamilton Official Plan and found on the city's built heritage inventory. Now, these heritage designations are on a municipal level. They're not on the provincial registry. So there is some different limitations on how we can interact with them. Because they're on the inventory, there are some requirements to consider when we look at altering any of the amenities that might have heritage value that are listed on the inventory. So staff have actually gone and we've retained a heritage planner to consult to undertake a cultural heritage impact assessment. Now, this heritage impact assessment, it's a two-part process. So the first part will be that they will identify the amenities within the site that have that heritage value. And the second part will be, how do we conserve that heritage value and make sure that we keep that in mind and use mitigation measures as we develop the park. So for the first aspect, they're doing that simultaneously as we're going to do the first stage. So until PIC number 2. When we have concepts presented and we present them to the group, we will work with the heritage group on the second aspect and look at those concepts and look to see how we can preserve the heritage value in those amenities that we're proposing. So whether that go through signage or that go through placards or potentially markings on the ground, we just want to make sure that we're honoring that heritage. We don't necessarily, it's not a yes, you can't do this or no, you can't do that. It's just how we mitigate it and how we still use that within the landscape. So when we look at the site in today, 2021, we see the park has a playground and swing set, which is just to the northeast there. That used to be formerly where the grandstands were. The spray pad is just south of the swing set. It's a concrete spray pad right now. The basketball courts is an old asphalt excess area. So we call it basketball courts, but technically there are 2 basketball nets that are side by side. So it's not actually a full court. The existing clubhouse is just along Charleston Avenue there. Now, the other amenities that you can clearly see on the site, the cinder clay running track, it's a 400-meter track. The natural turf sports field, which has been used for football, which is one of our larger fields. sport field specific lighting. So around that track, we have specific lighting that was used for sports or venues that were when the field was being used. Asphalt pathway system, as you may recall back in our points, that was actually installed in 1977, most of those paths. Outdoor ice rink. So you might be able to see on the south section of that football field, there's a little impression. It's a little brown area. That's actually where an outdoor ice rink is located when the seasons permit. And we have a community group. They're typically run by a community-based group. So if we have volunteers and the weather's permitting, there's an ice rink typically in that area. Throughout the park, there's some bench seating. Not a lot of formal seating areas, but there is bench seating. Park staff have used some of their benches and it's been moved around within the site. We'll talk about that later on. And along Charleston Avenue, there's a pair of monuments, one honoring those soldiers who lost their lives in World War I, and another indicating the heritage of the site, the history of the site. So when we start looking at the amenities within the site in a little bit more detail, we're going to start looking at the cinder track. We refer to it as a clay track throughout. I've referred to it as a clay track throughout most of the documentation thus far. It's cinder chip, meaning broken little frail pieces of clay brick. It's a 400-meter track. The current layout of the track, it's not conventional. It's more squarish. Typically, a track on the ends would have a radius transition as you go around. This track has radius corners and then it goes to a straightaway. So technically, it has 4 straightaways, which is a little irregular, but it's well used. The track also poses some accessibility issues. In the image to your bottom left and your top right, you'll see that it's got barrier curbs all the way around it. Back in 1977, when it was constructed, barrier curbs weren't really looked at as an issue. Now they create a lot of issues for accessibility. Being able to access the track, exit the track isn't always the easiest, depending on who you are and if you need a device, a mobility device, or for eyesight, it's a tripping hazard at times. The track also poses some maintenance issues. We'll talk about this with the field as well. There's some poor drainage at HAAA. Back in the day in 1977, when it was originally constructed, it was constructed with a single catch basin to catch all of the field drainage and all of the track drainage. Unfortunately, I mentioned that the track does have curbs, but there was never any depression put in that curb to drain the water from the track to get to the catch basin. So what had to happen was park staff would have to cut open the curb to allow that water to flow at the one location. That photo in the bottom left, the track's actually looking in pretty good shape right now. We do have times that we have a heavy torrential rain and it becomes a mush, I want to say, and the clay chips actually move around. So it does pose quite a bit of maintenance issues because we constantly have to level it out because we do get pitting and erosion from rain. And those who ride their bicycles on it, those bicycle tracks actually dig in a little bit deeper than somebody who's running. So the required upkeep is quite high. We do have an opportunity here. We know there's a track, we love this track, but it is very big. So right now it does pose somewhat of an issue in its current state, it poses a mobility issue and movement within the park. There's no clear direction, it's accessibility. So now we're looking to see what we can do to improve that track, especially the drainage of it. We want to make sure that this track is usable to all. And if there's an opportunity to reduce the maintenance requirements of this track, that'd be ideal. So in combination with that track, we have the football field. For anyone who has children or anyone who's visited the site and walked across this field after a rain, you know that this field stays saturated. The field has a clay base with a top horizon layer, so top 300 millimeters plus minus of topsoil, and then the sod. This field was used for football up until 2020. It was used for football. This field is not programmed at this time anymore. But what has happened over the years, numerous use, it doesn't have a chance to recover. So after it rains, that water sits on that field, and because of its poor drainage, water sits there, it saturates the soils, it has no place to go, it tries to permeate through the soils, it hits the clay base and it sits there. So now it creates a mud pit. As you can see in this image, that grass is worn out. So this field is also connected to Ryerson Middle School. So although there's no formal agreement in place, Ryerson Middle School uses this site as part of their educational programs, the gym programs, and also during the recess. They restrict where their students can go. They're allowed to use the field. The problem, not that that's a problem, the problem with the field in the current condition it's in is it doesn't get that chance to recover the way it's constructed. So for something to receive that much use on a daily basis, the field has to be designed in a different way, which is totally understandable, but it's a big undertaking. In the field, we mentioned about the sport lighting that we do have. We have the lighting is an older system. Those who live in the area might be able to tell you about the light output it does. So it does some pollution. It's hard to control it. So the lights that are currently there, they can't be controlled, the light output. You have to use shields and you have to really direct it. It's an older style. It uses a burnt gas within the light bulb. It takes a while to warm up. So this light system is inefficient. It's also specific to the sports field. So those who wanted to use the track at nighttime didn't really get to use the track at nighttime unless the floodlights were on, lighting up the entire field. It's inefficient, it's not ideal, and the timing system on the light was not always ideal. It wasn't fully operational, it's getting older, it's not as reliable as it used to be. You'll probably know some stories about the lights coming on late at night or not going off. We're looking to address that. We're looking to make sure that any lighting system that we do have within the park, A, is LED, so we're environmentally conscious. We want to make sure that we control the light output so we don't disturb the neighboring properties. We want to make sure that we're efficient. The basketball courts. So as I mentioned, we do have 2 basketball courts. Technically, the 2 half courts. And so we have 2 nets that are on this oversized asphalt area. So the area is underutilized because we have two nets side by side, but we have an asphalt area that's big enough to house 3 full-size basketball courts. So this is an opportunity that we probably could repurpose some of this land or look at opportunities for that basketball court. Look at opportunities for a basketball court elsewhere on the site. See if we can utilize unused areas or see if there's a better fit for that basketball court and see what we can do here. The asphalt that's currently on the site is broken up, pretty poor. It's got a lot of rutting. It's got some heaving. It's got a couple catch basins within it. The original purpose for this area was it was an overflow of snow storage area. So when we used to receive those heavy storms back in the day, back in the 90s, that snow had to go somewhere. So they used this as a storage area when they plowed the roads to store snow on the asphalt. On Charleston Avenue, there's 2 brick columns with about a 10-foot high fence that connects the 2 of them across the asphalt section there. That fencing should be addressed, probably be removed, and see what we can do to create that entrance that we really wanted this park. The playground and swings. These were installed in 1997. They're old in terms of play structures. They get used on a daily basis, so the wear and tear that happens to them. We look for a 20-year life cycle on a play structure. So these are pushing 24, 25. So that requires a lot of maintenance on our maintenance staff. Because this is an older style structure, the maintenance isn't as easy as it is today. So today's structures are changed a little bit. The footprints of the structures are a little different. The play value on the new structures are a little different. Accessibility, AODA compliance of the new structures have come a long way. This is our opportunity to look at this play structure and really put our mark on HAAA. We can put a play structure in here and look at our opportunities and make sure that the play structure meets the value of the park and make sure it represents the HAAA grounds, which is a landmark in City of Hamilton right now. This is a grading issue. We do know that, as you can see on this issue on the right-hand side, that area actually rises up to a couple feet above the play structure, maybe 18 inches. There's also an issue with the relationship between the play structure and the swings. If you're a guardian with a couple children that are playing in the play structures or overseeing a couple children, you can't keep an eye on your child that's playing on a play structure when you have another child swinging on the swings. That relationship isn't there. There's a disconnect. That's something that we can consider at this time. This is the opportunity that we can sit back and say, hey, can we do something to make sure that we incorporate the swing set into the play structure and create that complete area that children can run to and fro and not have to worry about crossing a pathway or not have to worry about not being able to be seen on the other side of that berm or on the other side of that hill. Make sure that they're in eyes view. That leads us to the spray pad. The spray pad's a similar situation. Where the spray pad's located, it's south of the play structure, but it's really south of the swing set. So it's quite a ways away from the play structure. So we're in the same situation that there's no central location that one could stand and watch and monitor, supervise their child or the children in the area from a central location. They have to pick. Do they want to play on the play structure? Do they want to play on the spray pad? Or do they want to swing on the swings? There's no central center view. The sight lines are a little off. As you can see by this photo of the play, as you can see by this photo of the spray pad, it's not really overwhelming. It's kind of there and it's tired. That feature that you see in the top right-hand corner, that was added in 2017. That was an additional plug and play. So what happens here is that feature can actually be lifted out and put into another park that has the same kind of receiver. So the purpose of that was to change it up and make sure that the play value of the play structure was always changing. And so children could see something new on a monthly basis, rotational. We did it as a pilot project. I think we have 7 of them in the city of Hamilton. This is one of them showing right now, but it's not really doing its purpose on this structure. As you can see in that photo, there is some cracking. There's been patchwork. There's been a lot of maintenance that's gone on. This was installed in 1993. So a lot of the spray jets that are there aren't controlled that well. So when they spray water up, that mist and that water does overspray, meaning it doesn't land on that circular concrete pad. It'll shoot over to the asphalt. It shoots onto the sod. It might create some drainage issues. But the problem is when that happens, and those children that are playing in that concrete, obviously they're going to run onto that sod. But that sod is now becoming saturated. So when that sod is saturated, it now creates a mud area, and that mud gets tracked back onto the spray pad, and it creates a little bit of havoc. The mechanical system for the spray pad is actually in the clubhouse. So another issue we have is when this is being maintained, the person that's working on the mechanical room, working with the controller, can't see the spray pad easily. So there's a disconnect there. Typically in our parks these days, we build cabinets around our spray pad. And the purpose of that is when we do maintenance, the person doing the maintenance can see what they're controlling and see what the results are by just turning his head, opposed to being on a walkie-talkie and having 2 people there and one troubleshooting while they're out there and one troubleshooting inside a mechanical room. It's not ideal. So we would be looking to improve this from an operational standpoint as well. And obviously we want to give this that pizzazz that it needs. Seating and asphalt pathways. So seating in HAAA is what you see on the left-hand side there. That is a City of Hamilton Park standard bench. Now we use these benches because they're resilient. They're not anchored to the ground, but they are resilient. We have the opportunity that they can take a beating and easily be fixed, replaced, or altered. And we can bring more and we can remove them and we can find where people are sitting. Right now, there's not a lot of formal seating areas that are designated as seating areas. As you can see by this photo, this was the preferred choice for those users of the park. So they put it on one of the berms, which is fine. As you can see, it creates a little bit of a maintenance issue. The area in front has been a depression now. When our park staff cut the grass, they have to actually use a weed whacker, like a line trimmer, to trim around that because their mower now is obstructed. Also, by having that much traffic in that area, we actually compress the roots, the soils around the tree's root system, and we could potentially reduce the health of that tree. Ideally, we'd like to create seating areas within the park, ideal seating areas. We understand that these are moved because where the benches were located didn't work. And we know that. There are some benches located in the park or where they were situated originally that don't provide us that view that we want. Sometimes you just want to be looking into the open area. You don't necessarily want to be facing the back of those private properties. We understand it's something that we have to address, and it's something that this concept plan will help us move through and make sure that we include enough seating and appropriate seating and where it's situated. When we look at the asphalt pathways, again, these were installed along 1977. So they've being well used, and they're showing their signs of showing their age. The width of the pathways are very narrow. So when a service vehicle comes in, and you can see it on that bottom left-hand corner of that photo, the wheelbase of most of our service vehicles overshoot these pathways. So what that does is it creates a lot of running. If the same vehicle runs on that pathway numerous times in that same area, it's going to create running, especially if it's near the edge. It's going to start creating those alligator cracks that we see. Now, this site was also, like I mentioned, these pathways are older, 1977, so we don't know what that base material is. They could be saturated, so they could be soft. The site has access problems for our vehicles. One issue, as an example, is you may have noticed that the actual playground, the fiberbar wood surface, isn't in its best shape right now. Our park staff are aware of the situation, but what they're having a hard time figuring out is how to get to that site at this time. That wood fiber mulch, because they need 230 cubic meters to go into that play structure, that would equate to 30 regular sized dump trucks you'd see on the road. So typically, this product would be brought in on a transport truck. As you know, Charleston Avenue isn't the widest and doesn't provide the greatest opportunities to close it down. And it's also a fair distance away that it's too far for us to be able to blow it in. Typically, they'd bring a transport truck in and they'd blow that mulch to the play structure. That transport truck cannot go in the site because the pathways are not designed to carry that load, and we would be causing a lot of damage. They're looking at logistics and how they can do it and bringing in smaller loads and smaller trucks and where that access can come from without causing that much disruption to the park. When we look at these pathways, they have to be redesigned in terms of the base material that they're built on to make sure that they're solid and they can actually hold the maintenance vehicles. They're also not wide enough. A lot of the pathways are really narrow. Today we have standards that we like to meet in open space for design for accessibility purposes. They're also deteriorating quite a bit, where a lot of areas there's cracking, there's heaving, there's rubble. We do know that park staff have done some work around the building in the past year. But right now, the remainder of the park, we have to do a big upgrade on these pathways. But we want to make sure that the circulation routes that are in place work for us, work for everybody in the community. We also are going to introduce a Greenway, which is a cycle route. We want to connect Pearl Street to Charlton Avenue. We want to create that a safe passage for those on bicycles to make sure for those commuting, we want to use this as a cut route rather than going around and off the roads. We want to bring them down through the community, through the park. Now we have to be wise when we do that to make sure that it's not in a high traffic area, that pedestrians will be walking across. And there is potential that we could use a system where we can have a dual use of that path, a multi-use path. That's something that we'll have to address during the concept plan as well. So you may recall in the context plan, I indicated 5 formal park entrances. On the bottom left-hand side, this is the Duke Street entrance. This is right off the Ryerson Recreation Center. This is where most of our maintenance vehicles actually enter the site. As you can see from the asphalt pathway there, it's not doing very much to help them. This path also has it's cracking, it's heaved in the middle, it's rutting on the outside. It's also terminating at a curb, so it's not AOD compliant. There's no way that this pathway is traversable by a young one on a little scooter, a young one on a bike, an older person, a person that might have mobility issues or sightline issues. There is issues with this pathway. This whole connection, this goes back to the asphalt. But Duke Street to Pearl Street should be a continuous route. It should be traversable. Right now, if we look at Pearl Street, we have this entrance that is small. I'm going to say uninviting. There's a concrete wall on the right-hand side behind that cedar tree that you might not be able to see. And on the left-hand side behind that fence is a driveway. We're aware of the situation. It's something that we're going to have to look at as we move through this concept stage to figure out what we can do and how we can actually open up this entrance to make sure that those who want to come down Tuckett and make it over to the rec center have a clear passage that can make it all the way down to the Duke Street entrance without having any barriers in the way. If we go down to Charleston Avenue, I have to warn you that these photos were taken prior to Parks operations staff replacing these two pathways. So what you see is not true representation of what you see there today, but the photos we had of the true representation didn't work out so nice. So that pathway was recently replaced by park staff. As you can see on the left, there is accessibility issues. That light pole that's right in the way of that pathway is there. So when the new pathway went in, it's still there. So they flared out the sides a little greater. You can see that pile of dirt, mud, just to the east of that, or just to the bottom of that picture. What's happened here is people are cheating the pathway because they can't use it. So they're using that as a cut route. And that just created a saturated mess, compacted the soil, wore away the sod. And right now we have a pathway that is, it's not accessible. We've widened it a bit, but it's not ideal. The other pathway that's just a little further east, it's great. The new work that's been done, it makes it a nice entrance. We do have a little bit of a grading issue. I don't believe that we have any, it's a little steeper than we'd like to see it, but I still think it meets our accessibility requirements. That's something that we're gonna have to look at as we move a little bit further. Along these entrances though, we do have gardens. So as everyone has always mentioned about HAAA, they have beautiful gardens along Charleston Avenue. Up until 2020, Frank the gardener, that everybody knows him by, was almost a full-time gardener at HAAA. Well, he retired. And park staff and our horticultural staff have been doing some upkeep on these beds, but it's working. It's getting there. It takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of effort. They don't necessarily have the staff to dedicate full-time to the site anymore. So we're looking at maybe potentially introducing irrigation systems and seeing if what we can do to keep these beds vibrant and keep these beds in place. We're always looking for maybe community outreach on these beds, but we know that the beds are part of HAAA, and we want to make sure that they're kept there, and we want to do everything we can to make sure those presentations are still there. HAAA building, the clubhouse, the field house, constructed in 1930. So at the end of Kent Street, as you're driving up Kent Street, you come up to this gorgeous, lovely architecture of a clubhouse. It looks fantastic from Charleston Avenue, but the same thing. It's 1930, so it's nearing 90 years now, and it hasn't seen a lot of upgrades in terms of the facade or even the amenities within it. I did mention earlier that there used to be a football team that played on the field. Up until 2020, they used this as their storage room and their change room for field play. They are no longer situated at HAAA. They've been reallocated up to William Connell on the Mountain. This site, this building is somewhat vacant right now. It's used for storage. It has a mechanical room for the site, for the park. It does have public washrooms. It does have opportunity to be improved. As part of the renewal plan, we're not focusing on this building per se. We are working with our facilities team. We are looking to improve the bathrooms and make them accessible and give them an upgrade and look at other opportunities within the building. You may recall I talked about that cultural heritage impact assessment. Until that assessment is complete, we really don't know what we can do on this building. So at this time, we're going to collect as much feedback as possible on how the community wants to utilize that building. Obviously, we want to see it there. We want to honor, we want to keep its value. We want to make sure that the characteristics as you're driving up Kent Street stay the same or honor that 30-year or 90-year heritage of it. But there is opportunity here, and we're going to listen. We're open to ideas, but we really don't know. I can't give you any answers until we receive that cultural heritage impact assessment, and we find out the limitations that we do have on this building. And also when facilities does a feasibility study to make sure that any upgrades are actually possible. And that brings us to our landscape. HAAA has approximately 50 mature trees on it. That's a lot of trees for one of our park sites. That's fantastic. Now there's always opportunity for additional planting. We'd love to increase that canopy. The existing trees are a good mixture of native and non-native species. A lot of Austrian pines, a few Norway maples, a couple white oaks, and a lot of honey locusts. We did talk earlier about where those benches are situated underneath trees, and if we keep bringing traffic to those areas, what happens is it compacts the soils. These trees were never planted with that in mind back in the day. There are ways that we can alleviate that soil compaction moving forward, but we have to be cautious of where we situate things to make sure that we keep these trees on site and make sure they stay healthy. We have done a tree inventory, and 99% of these trees that are on site are in a good or fair condition. There are a couple trees that are deemed as in poor quality right now, but that's because they have a disease. They have something called diplodia. We're looking at them, we're trying to preserve them, but when we look at the concept level and we start looking at situation and placing of amenities within the site, trees are a barrier for us, and we have to keep that in mind. There is potential, not saying we want to do this, but there is potential to, if we're relocating amenities for the betterment of the site and removing a tree, we can replace that tree with 5 more in another location. And we can look at healthy trees and older trees and big trees. Anything's possible here. We're really looking at blue sky thinking. So we don't want to look at the site with blinders on. We want to make sure that when we do this renewal plan, we want to make sure that we make HAAA the park it should be. So that brings us to our recap for the evening. We talked about the park's current features. We talked about how these grounds are aging and that we really have to do something now to make sure that we can still continue to enjoy HAAA. The renewal plan process is looking at it from a concept level. So we're really focusing on where the amenities are situated within the site, where there's opportunities to introduce new amenities, what's working for us, what's not working for us, what accessibility issues do we have, how do we make it so it's the most inclusive site, how do we make sure that it's diverse. We want to make sure that that site represents what we want a park to represent for the city of Hamilton. During the renewal process, we're looking for your feedback. I mentioned before that you are the resident experts of this site. We want to hear as much information as possible on how you use the site, what you like about the site, where the site has some weaknesses, how we can improve it. And unfortunately, I want to say like the safety issues of the site. Is there a certain area that you find that you always find bottles on the ground, or there's always a disturbance in one situation? We want to know where that area is. Without your feedback, we typically don't hear about it. So with that, we're going to talk about how we can actually participate. So I mentioned before, we have something called Engage Hamilton. So Engage Hamilton is, again, it's a public engagement, civic engagement tool. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to share another screen with you. So bear with me here, because we're going to go to the Engage Hamilton website and walk our way through it. Maureen, can you give me the thumbs up? Can you see the Engage Hamilton website? Perfect. So this is Engage Hamilton. If you go into your Google browser and you just type Engage Hamilton, this will be the first result that you get. You can also go to the project website, which is hamilton.ca/HAAA renewal, and it will redirect you to the site as well. So when you enter the site, some of you have already been on here. I see there's a lot of movement on here since Monday, which is fantastic. It's what we want to see. In the top right-hand corner, you'll see that it says W Kindred. I'm registered and logged in right now, but typically it would say either your username if you're registered, or it will say register. And when you register, you create yourself a username that will be public facing. Your actual information is not, but a username will show up. And what this page is, this is the splash page for our Engage Hamilton site. There's a lot of projects on here. So here we are in the middle of Hamilton Amateur Athletic Association.
Wes,
Yes.
may I interrupt?
Yes.
My apologies. Is there a way you could make that screen a wee bit bigger?
I can't. It's on my biggest screen. How about that?
Okay, that's
Does that
better.
work?
Yes, thank you.
So when you're on here, you'll see multiple projects. Hamilton Amateur Athletic Association is this one. But say once you're on here, you start seeing other things like the urban forest strategy, and you want to take part in that. You'll click on View Project. Once you're registered, you click on View Project. It takes you to a project splash page. So on the splash page, you'll see key dates. So this is where we'll list where our PICs are, potential dates that are next PICs, and really those engagement opportunities as we go through it. You'll see that we listed our virtual presentation. We listed our PICs on the board. And then we come down to these project-specific tools. Have a question. So this has been utilized quite a bit since Monday. So the user can come in here and they can ask any question they want about HAAA. What happens is when you submit this, personally me, because I'm the project manager of this project site, I'll receive an email saying you've interacted with it and you've submitted a question. Until I answer that question, it will not be published on here. So at this rate, on Mondays and Thursdays, I will be responding to all the questions we collect and sending them off to our web team, who will then update the questions. So they will actually upload the question, post it, and then post the answer with it. For those who have asked the question that's been asked previously under somebody else, because you can't see them yet, we'll answer that question once and make sure that it covers whatever the full question is from multiple users. So on Mondays and Thursdays, we will upload the answers and responses, which means that you'll see the questions that have been asked and the answers. This tab is a park survey. So in here, we have a pretty long, detailed park survey that you can go in and we ask you to complete. It really provides us a lot of feedback on how you use the site currently and how we can improve that. So we'll take that data and we'll use that, and we'll compile that, consolidate it. We'll present it at our next PIC, but we'll use that data to help us shape what the original concepts will look like. Share your ideas. So currently, I'm going to say view all. We've received 18 ideas to date. So this was posted, went live on Monday afternoon, and we've received 18 ideas today. So what you do is you go on and you post an idea, and it's anything you want. Anything you want to see within this site, you post that idea. You can share an image. You can provide a little description of what you'd like to see. An example, so I'm going to use basketball court revamp. So 8 Shields was the username that they picked. The current court is 2 half courts on inaccessible and cracked asphalt. I would recommend revamping the basketball court to include 1 full-length court, plus resurfaced asphalt, plus ramps for accessibility, plus markings for multi-use play. It's a great idea. We want to hear it. But as a reader, as another user, if you like that idea, for those who are not familiar with social media, there's a heart. Heart basically means giving the thumbs up or that you really like it. So I'm going to like this because I think it's a great idea. So now when we go back and we start reviewing, these 18 ideas that have come in. So I'm going to go back one page here. They're going to be liked, and I don't want to say the more likes it gets, it just means that it's getting more community involvement. So more people in the community would love to see that amenity or that suggestion implemented at HAAA. Now you can provide as many, you'll notice on here that, so this fellow's username is Brandon Racco. You can see that they've had some great suggestions and multiple things, which is great. The more the merrier, like I said, we want to hear it. So that is ideas. When we leave ideas, and the last one would be place a pin on the map. This is like a crowdsourcing exercise. So I have to start and I have to apologize. Because we Because this is a platform, it's almost like Windows Office. So this is Engage Hamilton, but it's called Bang the Table. So there's a platform of tools that we get to use, and they have rights for mapping sources. Now their mapping sources show Jones Memorial Cemetery within HAAA. Rest assured, Jones Memorial Cemetery is not in HAAA, but unfortunately, their mapping software has it situated there, and that's what they have the rights to use their mapping software. It might look like Google Maps, but it's not. This is a different version. Our web team is communicating with them currently. It's an ongoing discussion to figure out a different way for the mapping exercise. So what you would do on this exercise is if you click the plus sign, we have pins, and we've selected some topics: new feature suggestions, park strength, general observation, mobility, walking, cycling, park weakness, safety concern. And what you would do is you drag and drop a pin on the map. These green little buttons you see represent where 5 pins have been dropped. So I'm going to open up the blue pin, which represents park strength. The basketball courts are always being used. I would, however, make it so that a game could be played instead of 2 nets side by side. I would make it a court. It's a great recommendation. Now, one of the limitations of this tool is, as a user, I can't comment on that comment. So I can't say I like it. So for the purpose of this tool, what I would recommend, if you see a comment that you really liked and you put the pin down, make it match. So if we count up all the pins in the end, when we do a summary, we'll see that, sorry, I'm going to go back up here. We'll filter them out and we'll see new feature suggestion. And if we see 310 pins saying they want to see the ice rink at the south end of the field, well, we know that the rink at the south end of that field is a key element that this community really wants to see. And that goes without saying for everything else. Another example, park weakness. Not enough seating options. We discussed that in our presentation, that we have seating within the park, but no dedicated seating. So that's something that we're going to address, and that's something we're going to look into. So I encourage you as a family, because this is a great exercise for everyone. This is where your opportunity is to point out your elements within the site. And again, we want to hear everything, whether it be a negative comment or a pro comment. We want to know how you use it. And this is your opportunity to convey that message to us and actually pinpointing locations within the site.
Wes, I'm going to interrupt and say that this thing actually is a lot of fun to do, and something you could do with your kids. Have them think about some of the places that they've been, and if you guys can find pictures and post those up here, that would be outstanding.
Thanks, Steph. So Stephanie did mention something there about your kids working with the youth. Share your ideas. So we all see it. We all have seen that child run up and say, look at this, doesn't this look so nice? Or what's that? This is our opportunity where they can actually include photos. And this is the opportunity where we can include photos and say that we like things. So although we're not looking at this at a detailed level, you can definitely share those ideas with us. If you see a play structure as you're driving down the road and your child remembers that play structure and says, that's fantastic, let's do that. Or you see something in a magazine article, take a photo of it with the camera, upload it, and put it on here. We want to see it. And again, once it's on here, everyone else can see it. So an example of pump track. So this is a photo of a pump track that was, I don't know if the name of where the photo was actually taken is on here, but review pilot project at the Gage Park was extremely helpful. So this is just an asphalt pump track they did. But seeing that, others might not have thought of that. So now that they see it they like the pump track idea. And it's not a competition to see who gets more likes or whatnot, but it does provide us some feedback and saying, there's a lot of community members that want to see this within the site, which helps us. So that is Engage Hamilton. That is one of our avenues. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen and go back to my PowerPoint presentation. Maureen, thumbs up. Perfect. So again, because we're in a pandemic right now and we can't have that interaction face to face and we can't have those gatherings, we're working in a virtual environment. Now, because we do have Engage Hamilton now, that's making it a little bit easier for us. But rest assured, if we were able to do a combination of in-person presentations and have events at parks and be able to collect face-to-face data, we'd be using this in collaboration with that. This isn't a check it and forget it kind of thing, like let it run its course. We want to continue doing that engagement, but right now when we're working in a virtual environment, these are our options that we have. So with that, I would like to say thank you for joining us.